Alice is apathetic in life, but an accomplished scientist and mother. She creates a new breed of plant that is unique in every sense of the word. If well taken care of, this plant makes its owner happy. Unlike the ordinary care plants must receive in order to survive, Little Joe, the new plant she named after her son, requires an extra ingredient, the human voice. But such discovery would not come to life without inherent liabilities. A large greenhouse harbors a new generation of plants that silently grow side by side. Alice, a meticulous plant breeder, presents to a group of investors the concept of her latest creation, which is a plant that exhales a scent that makes its owner happy. The particular plant, Alice explains, must be watered regularly, kept from cold and heat, touched and talked with to ensure its survival. Chris, Alice's co-worker, explains some of the properties the plant has that are responsible for its uniqueness. The bond created between owner and plant is a result of the hormones the plant exhales, once it is correctly cared for. Alice, Chris, and Carl tell the investors that the flower was going to be ready to be launched at the botanical fair that is coming up. Chris emphasizes that the flower is strong and that all it needs is love. Alice's son, Joe, watches the visit to the greenhouse through surveillance footage in a screening room. The teenage boy looks bored and greets Chris as he walks in with apathy in his voice. He isn't happy. The workday is over and Alice goes home with her son. They set the table for dinner as Joe chats with his mom about Chris. He likes Chris and encourages his mother to give Chris a chance to be more than her colleague. Alice tries to change the subject by telling Joe he should spend more time with his father. The boy believes that his mom just wants him away so she can spend more time working. Another day comes, and Alice visits her therapist. During the session, she sounds calm, maybe a bit cold and distant from her reality. She confesses that it is hard to be a mother, but she loves her son and knows that she's not there for him all the time because of work. At the greenhouse, a scientist named Bella waits for Carl, accompanied by her cute dog. Carl and Bella work on the blossoming flowers as usual, but these are not the ones Alice has created. Bella sounds optimistic about this new breed and believes it's going to be a success. Carl, on the other hand, is not that optimistic. On the other end of the greenhouse, Chris and Alice work on their special flowers. Alice is focused on analyzing data, but Chris seems to be more interested in courting Alice and invites her to have drinks after work. Alice deflects from his invitation, talking about work. At home with her son, Alice brings him a surprise, a sample of the flower of happiness. She explains that the flower keeps people happy once they talk with it and shows it affection. At first, Joe feels weird talking to a flower and worries since his mother smuggled a plant she was not supposed to, but he likes to have a sort of friend at home. Another day at work, and Chris seems worried. Something went wrong in the greenhouse. The flower Carl and Bella have been tirelessly working on is passing away at the same speed that Alice and Chris's bright red breed blossoms. The group of scientists holds a meeting to discuss Alice's plant's unique property. The flower is sterile, so it will not produce seeds, and in return maximizes the scent it exhales. Alice's brief about Little Joe does not bring a happy reaction to some of her colleagues' faces. They argue that the Little Joe may have something to do with their flowers passing away so suddenly. Chris doesn't give up on inviting Alice to have a drink with him, but Alice is still reluctant. Alina approaches her colleague and seems to be in distress. She says her dog, Bello, is missing. Chris volunteers to help find him. He heads to the greenhouse to look for him. Little Joe surprisingly blossoms in front of Chris as they hear his voice. Chris is astonished. He keeps looking for Bello that comes out of nowhere and attacks him. Chris falls over some of the flowers and gets worried about the amount of pollen he has inhaled. Alice and Chris have drinks at the bar and talk about Joe's idea that Chris would be a good match for his mom, and Chris agrees. Alice is taken by surprise by Chris's answer and also by his attempt to kiss her. She deflects from his kiss and he looks embarrassed. He masks his embarrassment by going to the bar to get more drinks for them. Alice seems a bit uncomfortable with the situation, but not so much. Chris comes back with the drinks and smacks a kiss on Alice, who dodges him fast. He displays confidence never seen before. The awkward situation continues for a little while. Bello shows a different personality all of a sudden and worries Bella and her colleagues. At the cafeteria, Chris and Alice talk about Bella and her dog. Chris seems to know a lot about Bella's psychological condition. At home, Joe entertains himself with his aquarium full of ants and his newest present, the happiness flower. The flower grows as Joe takes pictures with and waters it. It seems like Joe is fond of the flower he was given. He keeps talking to the flower named after him, but he's attacked by its pollen, which intrigues him. Alice is back at work and asks Bella about Bello, who tells Alice she had him sacrificed. Later that day, Bella knocks on Alice's door. She wants to talk about how much Bello meant to her and connects his strange behavior patterns to the flower Alice has created. According to Bello's vet, he had senile dementia, which doesn't make sense considering his age. Bella shows Alice her research findings about how the pollen reacts once it's inhaled, but Alice is not on board with it. The conversation escalates to an argument, and Bella blames Alice for creating a dangerous plant. Up to that point, Bella or anybody at the lab knows that Alice had taken one of the flowers from the greenhouse. At her therapist's office, Alice tries to reason with the latest developments in her professional and personal life. She confirms that she has no feelings for Chris. Chris and Alice are questioned by Carl about Little Joe's effects on people and animals. Alice guarantees that Little Joe's pollen doesn't cause any allergic reactions, since she has one at home and no one had shown signs of allergy. Carl warns her that taking samples from the lab is against the rules, but they show bigger concerns regarding the flower fair that is coming up. Little Joe will be presented to the public there. Alice sounds irritated with Carl's reaction, and Chris asks for her trust in that case. Back at her office, she analyzes data from volunteers who underwent experiments with Little Joe, and they seem to have presented normal reactions to it. Joe spends some time with his dad. They go fishing and Joe's dad tries to bond with him, but, as a teenager, he doesn't seem interested in talking. Back home, Joe's dad tells Alice he looks different. Alice doesn't think so. Joe and Alice talk over dinner, but they seem to be on edge about the fact that Joe's dad wants him to move with him. It looks like Alice is in internal conflict. She wants her son close to her, but also wants him to have the attention and care he deserves, and that she can't provide. Before bedtime, Alice reviews Bella's research about the side effects of Little Joe's pollen, and feels intrigued with the data. Sometime later, when she finally falls asleep, Joe sneaks into her bedroom and takes something from her purse. It's late and Joe walks alone to a bus stop, and meets with a girl. He takes the girl to his mother's lab to show her Little Joe. He has taken her access card. As the teenage couple talk, the flowers exhale pollen that reaches them. The next day, Alice, Chris, and other scientists check the surveillance footage and realize one of the flowers had gone missing. Bella's theory is that, since Little Joe is a sterile plant, it's infecting people with pollen in order to, somehow, reproduce from the new behavior it installs on people. Alice strongly disagrees, but Bella gives a flash drive that will change her mind to a certain degree. Alice watches the videos that show the volunteers presenting side effects related to their personality, behavior, and feels unsettled. She goes to Joe's bedroom and finds him with his friend Selma. The girl stays for dinner and they chat over dinner. Joe and Selma, unlike most teenagers, talk with confidence and freedom. Joe informs his mother that he wants to live with his dad now, but Alice disagrees, and that triggers an aggressive reaction in Joe, who pushes his mom over a chair. Selma offers to help Alice. In Joe's bedroom, the teenagers talk to the strange flower as his mother enters the room to find that his aunts had passed away. When Alice asks Joe what had happened, he simply replies in an arrogant manner. At the lab, Chris finds out that someone is sabotaging Little Joe and suspects Bella. He shares his suspicions with Alice, who shares with him her personal issues with her son. Chris offers to help. Alice picks up Joe at school, who looks visibly annoyed by her presence. At the lab, one of the scientists tells Bella that he has to leave due to an emergency with his girlfriend, and asks Bella to cover for him. He gives her the instructions. She needs to handle the Little Joes. In the greenhouse, Bella realizes she's stuck inside, and no one seems to hear her. The more she screams for help, the more the Little Joes grow. She finds a small window and escapes. The next day, Bella seems to be strangely okay with what happened. She is happy and shares with Alice and Chris her new positive opinion of Little Joe. Alice is puzzled and Chris satisfied. Alice is conflicted and calls for an emergency session with her therapist. After the session, her therapist records her professional opinion about Alice's progress and says that besides being a workaholic, Alice also feels, unconsciously, the need to break up the bond with her son. Alice arrives home and finds Chris sitting on her chair. He talks to Joe and Selma in a very paternal way. Before leaving, he tells Alice he loves her, and they have a brief argument. The shocking and revealing news doesn't cease to amaze Alice. Joe and Selma share their views on Little Joe's effects and baffle his mother. Proving the strangeness of the case, he tells her he was joking. Alice never felt so confused. Alice finds the courage to confess to Carl she made a mistake in creating Little Joe. She's concerned that the components used to create Little Joe are mutating and infecting people. Carl doesn't look as concerned as he used to. Alice goes back to research more about the effects of the plant. While Bella works at the greenhouse, she suddenly begins to cry, but nobody cares. Later at the cafeteria, she confesses she hadn't inhaled the pollen, and expresses her concern about her colleagues. Everyone sounds dismissive, except for Alice. Chris and Carl stop Alice from helping Bella, and she feels trapped. Alice follows them after listening to Bella screaming, and arrives at a dreadful scene. Bella has fallen from the stairs. Carl and Chris don't look surprised. Bella is deceased. Alice is undermined at the lab. Her assessments of the flower are not considered at all, and Chris is aggressive with her. He slaps her in the face after a heated argument in the greenhouse, and leaves as she lays down completely unconscious. Now she's at the mercy of the Little Joes. The next day, Chris apologizes but doesn't sound regretful. Alice, on the other hand, sounds not like herself, and kisses Chris. It seems like she has fallen into Little Joe's spell. She makes sure to tell Joe she was wrong, and agrees to take him to live with his dad. For the first time, she looks and sounds relaxed at therapy, and dismisses her previous suspicions. She gifts her therapist a sample of Little Joe and goes back home without showing any remorse. Before going to bed, she checks on Little Joe and says goodnight to the plant. As she turns out the lights, Little Joe replies calling her mommy and saying goodnight.